Our gospel lesson this morning is from Matthew 25, the end of the chapter where Jesus tells the third of three parables. I invite you, as you're able, to please stand. Let us honor the reading of the gospel. And here Jesus says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, 'Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me.' Then he will say to those at his left hand, 'You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they also will answer, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you?' Then he will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to the one of the least of these, you did not do it to me.' And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Today we're in the second part of our three-part sermon series based on the new vision statement of the United Methodist Church, which is to love boldly, serve joyfully, and lead courageously. So today we're going to talk about serving others. For disciples of Jesus, serving is not an option. It's not an extra add-on. It's not icing on the cake. Serving is part of the DNA of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells three parables about what people do as they're awaiting for the arrival of a significant person, but whose arrival has been delayed, and they arrive at an unexpected time. The first parable that Jesus tells is about 10 bridesmaids waiting patiently for the groom. The second was about a very wealthy businessman who gives 3 servants huge sums of money to invest while he goes on a journey. And the third parable is what we have read today. It's a little different kind of story, a little different than the first 2 parables. It's more of a story that declares something about the future and how that future is directly connected to the present moment. It's a story about judgment and final separation, a topic that we Methodists have been reluctant to talk about because we don't want to be seen in the same category as those street preachers, yelling at people as they walk by. Do you know where you'll spend eternity, smoking or non-smoking, turn or burn? We don't want to be accused of being in one of those, churches out in the sticks that have those pastors that just seem to relish telling people about the eternal punishment that awaits them, threatening people. This is kind of a common thing in the church of my childhood, growing up in the church. My Sunday school teacher was named Mrs. Pleasance. Mrs. Pleasance had a very large, commanding presence. She had a love for Jesus, a love for the Bible. And for countless Sundays, Mrs. Pleasance would teach us Bible songs and Bible stories that she brought to life using flannel graph cutouts. How many remember flannel graph cutouts? That's really old school now, isn't it? Mrs. Pleasance also had no qualms about warning me and my fellow first and second graders about the tormenting fires of hell. And she would sometimes give us a list of actions or behaviors that would warrant our being tossed into the eternal fire. Things like listening to rock music, reading books about witches or wizards, or participating in satanic rituals. I'm not sure where she got her statistics about first graders participating in satanic rituals and the probability of that even happening, but I digress. As I grew up in the church, I began to realize that there were certain things that were not on her list that could lead to being cast into the outer darkness. Things like not feeding the hungry, ignoring the poor, not visiting the sick and the prisoner. These kinds of things were not on Mrs. Pleasant's list, but according to Matthew 25, they are on Jesus' list. And while we may be reticent to talk about judgment, Jesus is not. And while even from the beginning of the church there has been debate about how literal to take these images and figures, there really is no debate about the fact that at some point there has to be a reckoning for the things that have been done or left undone in this world. Jesus says that when the Son of Man returns in glory, he will gather the nations before him, and he will separate people into two categories, sheep and goats. And then Jesus says, the king, notice how the Son of Man is now referred to as the king will welcome his sheep into the Father's kingdom. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. Not you healed me, but you just took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And then the king will turn to the goats and dismiss them into eternal punishment. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. I was naked, you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. And it's at this point in the story that the element of surprise comes into play. Notice that neither group is surprised by their own behavior. Both groups freely admit that they either did do something or they did not do something. Notice how both groups of people, the sheep and the goats, were surprised to learn that they had met the king, the Son of Man, but none of them could recall the encounter. Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or in prison? When did we see you naked? When were you a stranger? They were in the presence of royalty, of someone of high esteem, but they did not recognize him because he was in the guise of someone who did not look very king-like. Neither group seemed to be paying attention to the camouflaged king. Years ago, there was that reality TV show, Undercover Boss. Anybody remember that? Ran for a number of seasons. The premise of the show was to follow a high-level executive or a CEO as they were in disguise, as they worked in disguise, either at a low-level or entry-level employee for the company that they themselves ran or owned. And by doing this, they learned a lot about their company. They learned things that they were doing right. They also learned things that their company was doing wrong or could improve upon. Most importantly, they learned about their employees to see which one of them fully embraced the mission of the company and were loyal, and which employees only appeared to be loyal. It's interesting that in Undercover Boss and in the parable of the sheep and the goats, people's true motivation is revealed not by what they said or what they believed, but by what they did. Their motivation was revealed not by the words that they said or their beliefs, but in their actions. Jesus says, at least according to Matthew 25, that when all is said and done, we will be judged not by what we have said, but by what we have done or not done. According to Matthew 25, the final judgment is not a theology test to see how much we know, but rather it's a theology test to see how much we have loved. And let me quickly add, this is not a parable with the moral about collecting enough good deeds or doing enough good deeds to earn a spot in the kingdom of heaven. It's more of a story about seeing the holy and the ordinary. It's about paying attention. It's about seeing and finding Jesus in the person standing in front of you at the checkout line, or finding Jesus in that stubborn teenager who tests your last nerve, or seeing Christ in the person who just cut you off in traffic. It's about seeing Jesus in the people you never expect. In the prize-winning classic play Our Town, we see a similar theme as a main character named Emily. Emily has died, but she is given a chance to go back to view a scene from her life. But it could not be some significant life-changing moment. It had to be just some ordinary day. So Emily chooses to go back to her 12th birthday, which was not a particularly notable moment. But upon second glance of this particular day in her life, she discovers a myriad of things, of choices, of details that she had forgotten or had never seen. Most importantly, she learns what many of us learn a little late in life, and that is that life goes by fast, and most of the time we're not paying close attention. And so Emily asks, do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. Some of you may remember that quote from one of the great philosophers of the 1980s, Ferris Bueller, who once said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. In light of Jesus' parable, we might say in a similar way that God shows up every day in our lives, but if we're not looking, if we're not paying attention, we could miss him. I remember reading a story about a young divinity school student who spent his summer in an internship at a Catholic homeless shelter that was run by an elderly priest. And at the end of one particularly hard, grueling day, after they had wiped down all the tables and stacked all the chairs, after they had washed all the dishes and put them away, the young man and the priest finally locked the doors, and they turned for just a moment and just kind of breathed a sigh of relief. And then they looked, and they saw coming down the sidewalk towards them was a woman who was pushing a grocery cart that was piled high with all of her belongings, and she was unkempt. Her hair looked like it hadn't been washed in days. She was slowly pushing this cart towards them, coming towards the homeless shelter. And the student was looking, and he says to the old man, "Oh, not another one. She's coming right towards us. She's going to want us to open back up." And in exasperation, the young man just says, "Oh, Lord Jesus." And the old priest just kind of nodded and said to the young man, "Yep, you're right, it could be him. He said he could visit, he could show up at any day, at any time, and he asked for us to be prepared and to welcome him, so we better open back up." And The old priest turned and unlocked the doors and turned on the lights, and they welcomed Jesus into the doors that evening. It's a story about paying attention, about seeing Jesus hiding in plain sight in the guise of people we would rather avoid. Maybe the kind of people we see standing by the roadside or at the end of an exit, standing on the median holding that sign, any amount could help, out of a job. The kind of people that force us to just keep our eyes locked on a stoplight to avoid the peripheral vision. I mentioned earlier in part of the service that service is part of our DNA. Service is what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. And we have lots of folks here who give of their time and energy in service, maybe serving on ministry teams or serving on some of our committees, serving at church events. Some of you serve out in the community, maybe part of nonprofit agencies. So if you are someone who needs a place to serve, looking for a place to serve, we have ample opportunities. In the near future, Chris Fulkerson, our Director of Discipleship Ministries, is going to be asking for folks to serve in our Vacation Bible School in July, which we're rebranding this year as Summer Camp. And it's going to have a rainforest theme. So that's a great way, that's one way to serve children and families in our community. And I want to stress that everybody has a gift. Everybody can serve in some capacity. Every year in United Methodist churches, usually around late summer or so, people are asked by the pastor or a member of what we call the nominations team if they would be willing to serve in a particular ministry area or on a committee or to volunteer for some event. And I've noticed that there's one particular response that I've heard for about 30 years in ministry as a pastor. It's a response that I've heard repeated a lot. Whenever someone's asked to serve, hey, would you help serve in the youth? Would you like to be on the children's ministry team? One response has been, no thanks, I've already served my time. I've already done my time. And when I hear that, I just want to go, I'm just asking you if you want to teach a children's Sunday school class. I'm not asking you to serve a prison sentence, but maybe for some of you, being around children is like a prison sentence. I don't know. Maybe children's ministry is not for you. You're not wired that way. That's okay. I can't remember if I coined this phrase or I heard this at some point, but I've been using it as a response, and it's this. Convicts do time. Disciples do ministry. Convicts do time, but disciples do ministry. You see, according to this parable, when we serve in Vacation Bible School, or when we collect cans and put them in towards our food ministry, when we work on building a ramp for someone in the community, when you're able to just simply smile and hand someone a bulletin and welcome them into the church, if you're able to write a note of encouragement or a card of encouragement to someone, maybe they've been sick, if you can pick up the phone and simply say, hey, I've heard you've been in the hospital, or hey, I haven't seen you at church in a while, we sure do miss you. If you're able to do any of those things, you are in some way serving the hidden Christ in others, and you are welcoming Christ. This parable gives us a kind of spoiler alert because the king tells the sheep and the goat that he was always hiding among the poor and the marginalized. And the goats could have pushed back with a counter-argument. They could have said, well, Lord, if only you'd given us a heads up, if only we had known it was you, we would have responded differently. If only we had known. Well, for those of us who are gathered here today, we've read this story, which means that in some way we've heard it, we know it, we understand it. We understand the implications. And because of this, we have no excuse. Jesus has told us that he hides himself in others. He's the God who hides right in front of us. Which means that on that day of judgment, whatever it may look like, however it may be, the real question that will judge our lives is not, when did we see Jesus? The real question that will judge our lives will be, how could we not see him? How could we have missed him? He's been right in front of us the whole time. Thanks be to God. Amen.